Good morning. My name is Kyle Houchins. I'm a tech and a trainer for McNeil, and this is Getting Started Rhino for Windows, the final edition of 2025. Being the holiday season around here, I figured I would do something mildly ridiculous and upgrade Santa Claus's ride here. So we're going to do this kind of crazy rocket sled thing. And the goal for this build is going to be a concept model, so nobody gets your knickers in a twist over this not being super polished or super finished up. We're going to try and bash something together that we could essentially throw through a printer in about an hour and have something that we could put on a desk and do something like that. Some of you have been through my webinars before and you know a little bit about me. I spent most of my career in the toy industry, and around the holidays it was always a pretty common thing for some executive to wander into your office and come up with some ridiculous idea that they needed you to build as a gift for somebody. And so projects like this were not terribly uncommon for my previous career, where someone would throw a sketch on your desk and say, can you build this, but I need it by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and it needs to be in the printer by 5, and it needs to be on somebody's desk by Monday morning, painted in a presentation box, if you could, please. That would be lovely. Great, toots. And off they'd go. So in the spirit of smashing, banging, moving fast, and breaking things, we're gonna smash through this thing and see if we can let Shrinkwrap save us at the end and turn all this pile of snot that we're gonna throw together into something that could actually be thrown through a printer that we could sit on a desk at the end of the day. So this form looks really daunting from the beginning. Like if somebody threw this on your desk and said, you got to build this, you know, a lot of folks, this would kind of make their blood run cold because there's a lot of stuff going on here. But if we break this down, and let's do a little breakdown here. By the way, I skipped over a lot of stuff. These getting started sessions are basically kind of a conversation between me and you. The way that these work, the day before or the morning of, and in this case, very early morning, I was squeaking by the skin of my teeth, and the drawing is still warm. Do a sketch right before the session, and then I put it away, and I don't look at it again, and I then build it. And the idea behind this is I want to simulate what happens when somebody walks into your desk, throws a sketch on your desk and says, build this, and you've never seen it before. You don't have any ideas. You know, you have to kind of figure it out and find the way along the way. And so for this thing, what I want to do is talk a little bit about the strategy behind how I would approach something like this. And if my time is limited, which we are on this as well, right? I'm going to go to SubD because SubD is by far the fastest way to try and pull off some kind of ridiculous form like this. And if we look at this break it down into its kind of individual bits, we can look at this form right here, and we can say this has a shape, something like this. It's got a feature line here, which if we were to look at this in side view, I would imagine that it would have a kind of a shape like this, right? And so we can say this is a 3-patch face right here. This is a 3-patch face right here. And then this transition is either going to be a crease or it's going to be a 3-edge transition right through here, okay? So that shape is actually going to be fairly easy to pull off. Once we pull that off, you can see that this face right here, and maybe this one, maybe we'll have to include that one, lines up kind of right in here. And so these guys kind of go together. And because this is going to have some kind of arcing section through it like that, we're going to have a face through the middle. So we're going to have at least 2 faces there, right? Because if we have a face that goes up and a face that goes down, when it goes to smooth mode and SubD, it's going to bend like that. Okay. This is also probably maybe 3, maybe 4, maybe 5 patches that way. And then because it's got a shape like this, it's going to have patches in the middle, right? And this form here, we may decide to integrate it. We may just smash it in. and let it, not even bother trimming it. We may just smash it in and cookie dough it, and then shrink wrap it later and figure out what goes on from there. This form, this is probably 1, 2, 3 patches right here. And because it's got a lot of shape, it's going to have a patch in the middle, right? So we're going to have 2 patches there. And then this shape down here, same thing. We can see that there's a transition line right here. And then the bottom of it kind of goes like this. So there's probably going to be a patch here, probably a patch there, and probably a patch there. And we'll start with that, right? We're going to start with 3 and see what we need. And the reason that we like 3 is because if you look at this directly in top view, right? If this thing has a shape that goes like that, once this would be your box mode, once you go into your smooth mode, right, or Rhino is going to give you a shape like that. And so your CVs on your SubDs are going to be here. And as you adjust those in this direction, your surface is either going to go in or out, depending on what you do with those SubDs. And so the goal here is to lay this thing out as simply as we could possibly lay it out, and then start to refine from there and, see what we can do. This form down here, this is actually, again, probably there's going to be a patch here, probably going to be a patch here, probably another one there, and then we will just chase this guy around like that. And then we're going to mimic that for this, so this is going to have the same topology coming through here, right? And then there's a transition. If we look at this section, we can imagine this section goes something like this. And so these faces up here are going to be there. These faces down here are going to be here. And this transition in the middle, we have to have 3 faces or 3 edges to get around this corner. So we're going to have an edge there. We're going to have an edge there. And the reason that we need 3 edges is the same reason that we need 3 points to make a curve in CV. And I talk about this all the time. If you've seen any of my videos in the past, you know rule of 3. And the idea behind rule of 3, if you haven't seen that video, there is a rule of 3 video on our YouTube. You should watch it. Is this. It takes 3 points to make a corner, right? And if we take this point and we move it out, we take this one and move it out, the corner gets softer. If we move it closer, the corner gets tighter. And so anytime we have a transition, we're going to make a 3-edge, in SubD, it's going to be a 3-edge or a 3-face transition. This is not how we make corners. We don't do this, right? There's no reason for that when all you need is this. And so we're going to try and break this down in a way that is as simple as could possibly be. So with that out of the way, and I'm stalling because I'm trying to figure out how to build this. I'm standing here talking about it, so I keep waving my hands thinking, okay, I'll figure this out as I'm going. But that's kind of how this is going to go. So let's take this image. Let's pick the picture. We're going to go to the materials. We're going to go down here to the object transparency, and we're going to just fade this out a little bit. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, and I'm actually going to just slide it out of the modeling window. And the reason I'm going to do that is if I were to leave this here and then go to shaded mode, it obscures the drawing, and I can't see it. So I like to take this, and I move it out of the modeling window so I can see what's going on. In this view, it's still, kind of targeted to where it is. Now, because this is going to be a desktop kind of printed thing, let's decide on some type of scale. Everybody always flames me for scale, so let's call this like 250 millimeters, and let's just set a basic scale for this thing, and let's just scale this from here to there. And now we know kind of the basic scale, if I were to throw a dimension on this, we're somewhere in the 250 range, okay? And for all of those of you who've teased me over the past about using imperial measurements, I'm using millimeters, so don't make fun of me if I have to do math live. I went to art school. Be nice to me. All right, so let's get going on this, and let's lock it. And the first thing I'm going to do is go here to the layers. I'm going to assign this to a different layer, and then let's lock that thing. So now it's in the modeling window, and we don't have to mess with it. Let's tackle the easy stuff to start with. And I feel like the easiest thing to tackle is probably the ski. And so let's start with a curve. I'm going to make this a SubD friendly curve, and I'm going to just draw a shape in here like this. Let's adjust it to match our drawing a little closer. And I typically paper doll this stuff, meaning I grab the single face tool. But in this case, I kind of like this ability. Once you draw a SubD friendly curve, if you extrude a SubD friendly curve, you kind of get your face structure for free. So it's a quick thing to do. And so now I can take this edge, and then I can extrude this down again. And then if we go to wireframe and box mode, we can start messing with this. Actually, let's do it in smooth mode. Why not? I always say do it in box mode, but let's try it in smooth mode and see what happens. Let's do... That's interesting. We'll go to box mode. We'll do it that way. So let's just pull this over here. Pull that up a little bit. Pull this in a little bit. And I'm Control-Shift dragging to get those points selected. And if we switch back to smooth mode, we should have our basic shape. And we do. Now, I've got my bone line here, right? This is where my transition is. But I don't actually have a transition yet. And if I were to grab this, you can see that the transition is going to be too soft. Or it's too sharp, actually. At this point, it's a crease. If we remove this crease, now it's going to get too soft. So in order to tighten that up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just bevel this crease. And I'm going to do that in box mode because it's easier to control. We're going to just add a little bevel in here, like that. And now I'm going to remove my creases. And now we've got a little bit better of a shape. I didn't want to pull it over quite that far. And maybe we grab this one. We can mess with that transition a little bit. And then I want to crease that point. Okay. Here we go. And I'm probably going to crease these 2 points as well. Somewhere in there. There you are. And that gives me my ski shape. Okay. So let's finish that off, and let's just grab this edge right here and this edge. And let's just extrude that out one. And then let's grab this edge. Actually, we can just do this whole thing. Deselect those. And let's bridge those. Or not. 4, 2, 3, 4. There we go. Bridge has to have matching edges. And bridge is also fussy about about the picks, so we have to follow the directions pretty closely. So we're going to set the first edge. Now this is going to be the second edge. And that'll bridge that together. And as far as segments go, I'm pretty okay with just one on there. And then let's add a bevel to this. And we're just going to add our little 3-edge set there. And we'll add a little 3-edge set here. And then that's going to give us the sharpness we need on those corners. All right, probably do this edge, probably bevel that edge as well. And then we should be able to get rid of all of our creases. I like using bevels over creases because they're a little bit easier to control. And that gives us the ability to be able to adjust this edge, you know, kind of finely as we want to do it. So, all right, so there's our first part of our ski. Let's do the second part of the ski. We'll do the same thing down here. SubD friendly curve. Like that. And I'm just going to extrude those faces down. Go to box mode. Go to wireframe so I can see my sketch. And I'm just going to tighten this up a little bit. Tighten that up a little bit. Let's move this out, kind of like that. And then ski has a second part up here that kind of transitions in. It's just 1, 2, 3, right? We're just 1, 2, 3ing our way to where we need to be. And so let's pull this in a little bit like that. And at this point, if we were to look at this, this is our 1, 2, 3. So if we go to smooth mode, if it didn't have creases, it's got creases. Let's get rid of the creases. If we go to smooth mode without creases, you can see that that's a very, very soft transition. So what we need to do is this needs to be 1, this needs to be 1, but this edge actually needs to be 3 in order to get this effect, which is, right? So right now what we have is this. Very soft, right? 1, 2, 3. What we need is this. Right? So we need a 1, 2, 3 right there. So what we're going to do is bevel this edge. And we're going to bevel it just a little bit. Now, people get bent out of shape because bevel kind of, you know, does some wonky things sometimes. Just get the bevel in, because you can always pick an edge and slide it and adjust this later. So don't get too worked up over whether or not bevel is doing anything, like, you know, sometimes bevel gets a little wild on you sometimes. Don't let that, you know, don't let that throw you. Just keep cruising and then adjust the edges and stuff later. I'm going to cheat, and let's just mirror this, and then we're going to join these two and we're going to make them smooth. And that gives us this. And let's move this guy over kind of in something like that. Maybe this edge down here needs to pull down a little farther, so I'm just going to extrude another set. And then that all intersects there. Now, we could spend the time that we need to do to bridge these two together and have like really smooth transitions. But like I said, we're going to move fast and kind of smash stuff. So I'm not super concerned about whether this stuff is intersecting. You know, it just needs to be overlapping, right? So this is overlapping completely and that's overlapping completely, because when we go through and run Shrinkwrap on this, Shrinkwrap is going to do the unification for us. So let's bridge these guys together. And one of the little subtleties of bridge is if you pick edges that do match, you can pre-select them and run bridge. If they don't match, then that's when bridge starts misbehaving and starts, you know, fussing at you. So we can crease it and make it sharp on the bottom. I'm probably not going to worry about that. I'm going to leave it. Actually, maybe. We'll leave it like that. We'll leave it soft. And then we can always bevel this edge. I don't like this topology down here, so I'm going to actually just stitch those two using the stitch command. And then that way, that gives me an edge down here that if I were to bevel this, it's going to go more in the direction that I wanted it to go in. And like I said, bevel gets a little wild sometimes, so don't worry a lot about it. It's something that you can always go back and adjust later. I just get the edges in there and then you can adjust them later. And so now if we go to smooth mode, that gives us this. And then let's grab this entire edge. Let's see what happens. Let's use the filter to toggle this to points, and then let's stitch that and just see what it looks like. I'm okay with that, because we can always grab this edge, slide it a little bit. That gives us a nice little point. Again, we're kind of moving fast here, so I'm not gonna spend a lot of time sweating this stuff. I'm just gonna kind of keep pushing forward. Now, it looks like our transition here is a little sharper than what I have, so I'm going to actually add an edge right there and let that transition happen a little softer. And then let's look at the shape of this and decide if we like it. And in this case, I kind of don't. I kind of want this to be a little cooler shape. So let's play with it now. Maybe we pull this in and give it a little bit more interesting profile like that. And then maybe even this edge and this edge come in. Got a little weird topology back here. We'll deal with that. Maybe we pull this in just a hair. And then maybe even this one could be a little bit more interesting. Maybe just these center sections. This is the beauty of SubD, is you can start. It's playful. You can come in and start playing with things and get very interesting shapes, and start kind of having some fun with it. Add a little bit of shape to that, and then skis are not typically dead flat end to end unless you grew up in the 70s like I did. So let's add a little shape to it like that. And then I don't like the relationship between these two anymore, so I'm going to move this over just a little bit. And this one, I don't like how that's coming together, so let's pull that back a little bit. Like that. Now, like I said, there's a couple of options as far as the transition between this piece and this piece. We could actually go through and, you know, do the topology in order to be able to connect these all up so it's a beautiful, like, sweet transition. I'm not going to do that for this. What we're going to do is simply just shrink wrap over this. The other option is if we went to NURBS, you could do what I refer to as a pipe trim, which is you trim a gap out of this one, trim a gap out of that one, and then use blend surf in between the two. I do that all the time when I don't want to mess with the topology on SubD. I will grab the blend surf tool and just blend surf this stuff together. And that's a super easy way to handle that. Now I'm messing with the topology a little bit. This transition was a little sharp, so I didn't really like that. This transition is a little sharp. I don't like that. So I'm going to soften that up just a little bit just by getting rid of the center of that. And this one actually is a little sharp, so I'm going to get rid of that one. And that softens that up a little bit, makes it a little bit more elegante. Let's slide these guys in a little bit. I feel like I want to read that highlight off of this edge just a hair more. So let's pull that out. Spent the first part of the video talking about how we're not going to move. We're going to move fast and not really worry about stuff, and then here I am doodling. So, yeah, what are you going to do? I'm going to take this end of this thing. I want to skinny it just a little bit so that there's a little bit more thick-thin going on there, and then I'm going to fatten this end just a little bit. I like that kind of teardrop thing that's going on there a little bit better. Maybe this edge got a little fat on me. That feels a little nicer. All right, so let's call that skis. I'm going to group those for the time being, and let's move this out to where we think about our track should be, something like that. And then I'm going to mirror. And that's our setup. Now, we may need to mess with that. We might need to move this out a little bit farther. But that's the basics of that. Okay, so now we got skis. So, and the back of this is ugly. Let's fix those. Let's grab this. And I'm going to use the filter to change that to points, and then I'm just going to stitch. Now, the topology on this is not something that I'm terribly proud of. So let's mess with this a little bit and see if we can take some of the awful out of this. Let's take these guys and these guys. Let's stitch those together. I basically wanted this just to come to a singularity at the back. Stitch that up. And that edge, let's get those points on, shut that one off. Good enough for shrink wrap. That'll work. Still some mank in here that's not amazing. You know, this edge is probably could go away, and this edge could probably go away. But for what we're doing, it's going to work just fine. Okay, so let's look at the next biggest part of this thing, like the main body form. I'm going to stick these on a layer and change object layer, and I'm going to lock them. And I'm going to not make them purple because I don't like all the candy colors. And then that way we can hide these things if we need to. So let's hide them for the time being. And then let's look at the layout of the body. Now, the body on this thing, the main form on this I'm going to start with is kind of the profile shape here. So let's go ahead and draw that. Again, SubD friendly curve. And we're going to just draw our shape. Looks like I've got grid snap on. And then it's got a little ducktail in the back, so that little transition back there. And that's good enough. So let's just extrude this down. That's going to give us a row of points. Go to box mode and start getting what we need here. Filter on or something. Interesting. I just updated Rhino right before this video, and I'm wondering if there was somebody messed with something on the selector. It's behaving a little weird. All right, so that gives us this first little strip right here. We need another set of edges here, so I'm going to just extrude down one, and then I'm going to extrude down again, and then I'm just going to scale to 0 to flatten these guys out, and then we'll pull this up. And so now we can just grab this guy. I'm going to relocate gumball to here. I'm going to rotate gumball to there, and then I'm going to scale this edge flat. Relocate gumball there. And then scale this a little bit. And that gives us kind of our front end. And maybe we'll tuck these in a little bit just to give it a little shark mouth. And then the back of this, actually these edges right here come way up like that. And this edge is going to come way forward like that. And then this top edge is going to break over to start creating our shape like that. And then this bottom edge is also going to break over to get our kind of tuck under. Now, if we go to smooth mode, we should have something that looks like this, and we're going to get rid of these creases. And that should give us something that looks like that. Now, we can start picking edges and slide them to get a little softer result. See how that, remember, this looks familiar, right? We're moving points farther apart and they get softer. We move them closer together and they get tighter, right? So if I grab this point and I slide it, see how that sharpens up? If I move it away, it softens. It's just threes. 1, 2, 3. That's what's making this up. 1, 2, 3 is what's making up this part of the transition. 1, 2, 3 is what's making up that part of the transition. Once you understand that 1, 2, 3 thing with SubD, all of the mystery falls away. All right, so let's mess with the shape of this now, and we can do that by just adjusting this, right? And I'm going to hide this curve. Actually, I'm going to delete it because we don't need it anymore. And then if I mirror this by here, and then we take these two things and we join them smooth, we get the basic body of our vehicle. And we can crease these points down here to get that little sharp edge right there. And maybe we want to pull these 2 points out. Starting to look kind of interesting now, right? Kind of like a speed carp. That was a big insult when I was in car school. It's good. Looks like a fish, like a speed carp. And fight. All right, so let's get this back where it needs to be. Let's get this where it needs to be. And that's kind of feeling... I'm going to slide this point back down a little bit. I want that highlight to tighten up a little bit. And I'm only messing with one side of this. I could have this set to some kind of symmetry, but... I'm not going to worry a ton about it. Can always go back and do it again. So I like this side. I don't like the other side. So let's just blow it away. And we'll just mirror again. There is a symmetry command in SubD. And everybody's like, how come you don't use the symmetry command? I'm like, A, because I'm lazy. And B, I do actually kind of like to experiment with the form and see, you know, kind of what works. So let's close this off. And let's bridge this. And I'm going to add a couple more segments in here. Maybe like that. And then what that'll do is that gives me the ability to adjust the shape on the bottom of this thing, how tight that transition is. Like maybe we add like some kind of crazy ground effect thing going on there. Not necessarily indicated in the sketch, but I tend to, especially when I'm modeling my own stuff, take the sketch as just a suggestion and then figure out like, you know, what I really want the thing to look like in 3D. Because you can't lie in 3D, right? You can lie, cheat, and steal on a sketch. That's like, anybody can do that. You know, I see people generating stuff with AI all the time, and I'm actually pro AI. That's a controversial thing, but there is a lot of lying, cheating, and stealing going on there, where once you get over the novelty of the thing, it's, you know, there is some practicality that has to happen at some point where you say, okay, well, now this thing actually has to be a real thing. And that's where getting something into 3D really makes a big difference. So while I was talking, what I did was I selected this edge and I just started scaling, held down Shift, held down the Control key, and that extrudes in another ring of faces. And as I do that, now I can use the extruder on the gumball and just model that intake in. And then just for sight lines and stuff, it probably makes sense to just take this and tuck it up like that, so when you look in there, you don't see the opening. And I would probably even take this, because of what we're going to do with it later, I'd probably just take that and stitch it into a singularity and leave it alone so that it's closed. And I may need to add like one more edge in there so that it doesn't get a little weird. Or I can even do what I did before, which is to select this, start scaling, hold down Shift, hold down Control, and scale in a cap, and then turn that to points, and then stitch that. And that makes a little cleaner thing like that. So this is now closed up in the front. And then let's bridge the back of this together. And I probably will use the same settings I did before. That way everything lines up. And then I can stitch these two. And I can stitch these two. And then that way the topology all flows the way that it's supposed to flow. And then I can always go back if I want to start adding details. I can say, well, does this have a little secondary, you know, canard or something like that on the bottom that makes something interesting, which that's kind of cool. I don't hate that. Let's play with that a little bit and see what we get. That's kind of a fun little highlight. So this guy's closed up, and then back here we have a decision to make about how we want to close this thing up. Because we don't have the same number of edges, right? I've got 2 edges up here, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down here. I need to figure out how to kind of start combining this stuff. So if I take these two and I stitch that into a triangle, and I take these two and I stitch that into a triangle, now I've got 1, 2, 3 edges. Still isn't going to work. So what if I take these two and stitch those into a triangle? Now I can bridge between those two, and it ends up working. Now, the edge of this ended up failing because we've got some stuff going on here. So I'm just going to stitch that corner and that corner, and then I'm going to go back and crease those in order to get my sharpness back, and then I'm going to take this and tuck it up a little bit so that it gives me the kind of shape that I'm looking for. And we may even want to go and start like combining these a little bit farther down, like maybe these two stitch, and that way the topology fights itself a little bit less. Maybe we stitch these earlier and let that kind of do something like that. And yeah, it'll work. That's fine. We could mess with this a little bit more, but I'm not gonna. It's kind of doing what we want it to do. Let's do something here as far as evaluation is concerned. Let's throw the automotive environment in here because I like it because it's got a really nice horizon line on it. So I'm just grabbing that from the Rhino environment library. And then if we go into rendered mode, and we should probably make it red because it's our Santa. So now we can start checking highlights and start with the oohing and the eyeing, saying, okay, well, that's doing what I want it to do, right? Okay. How we doing? Need to pick up the pace a little. All right, so let's bring our skis back. I may have been a tad ambitious with this build. And it looks like our model is actually not at 0. So let's fix that. And then the skis kind of need to attach to the sled somehow. So I'm gonna unlock that, and I'm gonna just grab a face here, and I'm gonna extrude, and then grab. Somebody has messed with the selector. And I'm going to just draw some kind of fantastical suspension component in here. And we'll call that something interesting and just leave it be. That'll be enough. Maybe we play with the shape on this. Does it look cooler like that? Does it look cooler like that? I kind of tend to like something like that. Looks a little swoopier. So let's call that good. Now, we've got this form on the back. It's kind of an interesting one because it integrates in with the body. And again, because of how we're going to handle this at the end, and it looks like I lost my corner here. Because of how it integrates in with the body, I'm not going to worry too much about any of this. So let's hide this for now. Let's go back to our curve drawing technique. And this one we're going to do really simple. This is just going to be a 3-face thing. And we might need one edge in the middle just because this needs some shape. So let's do that. I'm going to insert an edge in the middle, and then we'll just add some shape to that. And then this edge up here, we're just going to extrude that straight up. Control Shift Drag is how I'm getting the additional, how I'm selecting the sub objects of this thing. If you're like, how in the world? And so we've got a flat piece now, right? This is what I refer to as a paper doll. And if I pull this over, that's that transition. And if I pull this over, that's that transition. And this is creased right now, which I don't want. So I'm going to uncrease it, but I am going to bevel it. Bevels are a lot easier to do in box mode, by the way. And so that gives me that transition. And then I can mess with this transition. Come now. I'm going to have words with the developers. They've messed with my selector. So that gives us that shape. And then this edge right here controls how much bend or flex this thing has. And then this edge controls how sharp that highlight is. And so if I bring this up tight, that highlight sharpens up quite a bit. And I think that's kind of what I'm looking for. And I may get rid of that one just to soften that a little bit. I like that better. Now, if we count, right, and I've got 1, 2 edges here, if I consider that this is the side of my box and this is the top of my box, then I have to get 2 faces over here in order to get this guy to turn the corner. So if I go 1, 2, and then I go to box mode and I stitch that together and I stitch this together and I get rid of this crease. Then same thing over here. 1, see that? That lines up. 2, and then I stitch these 2. I have a hotkey set up for stitch, by the way. That's why I'm not hitting the command. And I highly recommend that you set one up for yourself because you will be using it a lot. So now that gives us this kind of shape. And this edge here probably needs a soft crease because we've lost our sharpness here. So let's throw a soft crease on this. Let's do a constant weight of like 60, and that will give us our sharpness back. And let's do 70 on this one. And that gives us the ability to be able to take this edge then and put it right back where we wanted it and maintain the sharpness of that form without it being like, it doesn't need to be laser sharp. There is a crease on that, which I want to get rid of, and there's a crease on that, which I want to get rid of. And that'll soften that thing up a little bit. So that gives us our little pod, right? And we can say that maybe this is like some sort of ski, skid, skiff, whatever thing. So maybe this is supposed to have a flat bottom. Anytime you're designing anything that's like even a fantasy thing for like some kind of supposed purpose, you should think about like kind of what the thing is and, you know, does it make sense? Like, does it have like the basic feasibility of the machine that you're designing? So let's get this and go to box mode, and we're going to extrude these guys over one, and let's stitch that. Stitch that. Screwed up. Gotta go two. That one. That one. Any questions so far? You guys have been quiet. Either boring you or fascinating you. Either way. Come for the boredom. Stay for the fascination. All right. So that is our basic kind of pod shape for the side of this thing. Now we need to worry about this buttress. And I might want to pull this edge. That's okay. I actually may need an edge right here. So maybe what I want to do is actually add another edge right there. There will be, the video does definitely get posted after this. So this is going to be on our YouTube channel. So there is a transcript that goes with that you're certainly welcome to comb through. Not a problem. Not a problem. All right, so let's extrude this up, and then we need to go over. So we need to make the transition from this piece, and we need to go over. So we're going to need at least 3. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll go to box mode, and I'm going to grab these. I'm going to pull these way over here, and I'm going to pull this one over here. And you can see that blade kind of just happens, right? That's kind of fun, and I'm going to hook that back so that it gets that little transition, and when we go to smooth mode, you can see that that just kind of appears. Now, it's not in the right position, so let's fix that. So let's grab this, start pulling that over. Let's bring our body back so we can see where it is. Let's stick that out there like that. And so now we need to just kind of stab this into the body somewhere. And it would make sense for it to kind of align right in here like that. Although it looks like on our sketch, it's actually a little higher. So let's put it up here. And it looks like our body is a little short, so compared to our sketch. So let's pull that up a little bit. And then we just gotta sort out the rest of this stuff. Let's pull that over, poke it down a little bit. And you guys don't believe me that this garbage can is going to turn into something good at the end with Shrinkwrap, but hang on. That's what I keep telling myself. It's going to work out. It's going to work out. All right, let's get this edge a little cleaner like that. All right, let's see what that looks like. That is a little high. Don't like that. That's a little high. Don't like that. Actually, let's see what happens if we delete that. That's fine. So that's starting to do something a little bit more interesting. Let's crease that point. If you crease the points, you get that sharp corner, which is basically what I need. So we're creasing that. And then that gives us that. Let's just tuck that in. And we can play with that transition where that hits. We're just looking for where the intersection is. And that. Let's crease that point too. And that one as well. That'll give us our little more of our sharp edges like that. So we're kind of in the right direction. I think this is probably high. That probably needs to go back up. Starting to kind of come together. Maybe this edge drops a little bit, so there's a little definition in there. Let's see what it looks like if we mirror it. Actually, let's look at the top view and see what we got. Let's type top correctly. Let's take 10 times. Let's have it take 10 times to type the word top. All right, let's add a little shape to this. That's a little cooler. Let's look at the box mode. I'm going to isolate this and look at the box mode and just make sure that we haven't made a mess of anything. There's a technique for box mode where you can kind of sight down the isoparam lines, and like on this one, see how this is kind of like a weird, I don't really like that, so I'm going to straighten that out a little bit. And then back here, that one kind of doesn't flow nicely, and this is kind of inverted. You kind of want all of your box mode lines to flow nicely. And so when you see one that's really like kind of canked out of alignment, that way you can kind of go back in and see. Like, for instance, if this one was like pushed way in like that, and you couldn't figure out, like in smooth mode, where is this weird transition coming from, go to box mode and look at it, because you can see, like, well, it makes sense. And this is one of the biggest reasons why you want to keep your models. See this? Ooh, messy. Let's fix that. All of this stuff should kind of flow in a way that makes some kind of sense. It shouldn't be really, really crazy. You shouldn't have anything massively out of line. And if you do, that's probably where your geometry problems are coming from. See this little inversion right back there? So that feels a little better. All right, let's mirror this over and see what it looks like. Just kind of overall stance. Let's throw it in rendered mode and see what it looks like. We're getting there. I don't hate those in white either. Let's just do that. Let's make these white. All right. So we need to add some volume to these guys. So let's do that quickly. And the easiest way to do that, I'm going to isolate and go to shaded view, is just to start kind of stitching things up. And so I've got two faces right here. I've got two faces right here. I can bridge those, and I need 1, 2, 3 segments in between. So let's bridge those. And I need some segments in between so that I can stitch this edge and that edge. Did I do that right? Maybe. That edge, that edge. So that closes that up. And then for this, I can do something fun like start dragging, tap Alt, and make copies of those faces. And then that way I know all of my geometry is going to line up, so I can take these two and bridge. And I'm just going to do one segment in between there. And then I can take this and do that. So now that's closed up. And so now the only thing I need to do is I need to attach these things in here. So that can go there. And when you're trying to do something like this, oftentimes it's easier to do it a little bit at a time. And so like this, I can bridge from here to here. See how I can kind of sneak up on it? And then you can kind of see what you're left with. And in this case, there's a weird topology thing happening back here that I don't love, so I might just bring that in like that. Let's see what that looks like. Don't love that, so let's see what happens if we get rid of that. That's better. It's kind of a happy accident. I actually don't hate that. I think that's kind of cool, actually. So let's leave that. I like that little secondary swoop in there that just happened. Says he likes it and then immediately changes it. It's like my wife. She said she liked me and then immediately wanted to change it. All right, let's bring this in like that. All right, so now we've got everything is closed, right? So this is closed, this is closed. Well, it's not closed, but it's overlapping. So the last thing we need to do is kind of add our cowl back here. And I think we might be able to actually do this by stealing geometry from here by just grabbing those faces and extruding them. But it makes it a little bit difficult to try and get it to do what you want. So let's and now my ability to rotate has gone away. Well, that's fun. Oh my God. Rhino's just taking a little nap. There we go. I've seen that happen probably in the 30 years that I've been doing Rhino. I've seen that happen probably about 4 times. The fix is to just do the 4-view command and then let Rhino kind of reshuffle the camera. I would love to have an explanation for why it does that, but like I said, I've only seen that. That's probably the 4th time I've seen that in 30 years. It's a very strange phenomenon that you all got to see live, which is always fun. All right, so we're going to pull all of this stuff. Let's grab these faces and extrude them in again. And then we're just going to scale down, and we're going to tuck this down like that. And then this ring, let's scale that in a little bit just to give that a little bit more thickness. And then we can adjust to match our sketch. And that actually is kind of coming together pretty nicely. I buy that. What do you think? Let's see what kind of reflections we're getting here. That's fun. All right, so for the last thing, I am going to, because I want this to be, I missed the sketch a little bit, but for the last detail, which is this cabin in here, I am actually going to just do that with a completely separate piece of geometry. And I'm just going to do that with a sphere. And I want I want a quad ball sphere. Let's see. 4. I want 4. And the style is going to be quad ball. And we're going to stick it right there. And from the top view, I'm just going to grab this and stretch it forward. I'm going to stretch this back. And then these I can pull out. And then we can just start smashing this until it gets to be the shape that we want. I'm going to lock all of this. And this is gross. I will absolutely admit that this is kind of filthy, disgusting modeling. But I'm okay with it because it's going to get us what we want. Just scaling and changing stuff until it makes the shapes that you want it to make. Let's see how we're doing on our sketch. All right, hour 8 minutes so far. I'd say that's all right for the complication of the thing that I so foolishly decided to try and pull off live in an hour. I'll never learn. But Kyle, they said, why don't you do simpler things? But people, I said, where's the fun in that? Let's add the quad ball topology. I'm losing a little bit of definition right here. So let's add that point, which gives me that ability, which is what I was missing. And it doesn't really matter what's happening to the rest of this stuff, the rest of this piece. It just, the only thing that matters is that we're getting the shape that we want. And in this case, it's, I think I want to expand that a little bit. And then let's get a new material. And I'm going to make this black, even though this should be glass, but just for the sake of visualization, that'll give us what we want. Okay? So this is, I'm going to call this pretty much done. Now, if I was going to continue with this, you know, if we had another hour, I would go through and probably, I've got a clip art file full of model parts, and I would jam a big jet engine and all sorts of other stuff in here. But I think for generally speaking, for the time that we have here, I think I'm going to call this good in order to keep this from turning into something that goes on for hours and hours and hours. But what I am going to do, because this thing at the time, right now, as it sits, if we had to throw this through a printer, this actually is open, right? So if I say cell open SubD, a lot of stuff lights up. The main body doesn't, this doesn't, some other stuff doesn't. The key with this is to make sure the stuff that's open is tucked inside something else, because then we can grab this entire part and we can shrink wrap it and we can preview it and we can hide the input objects, and then we don't want to fill holes. And then what we need to do is start messing with our target length here. And I like to go down by 5. So let's go, or down by half. So let's go down by half, and let's not draw the mesh wires. Still pretty crunchy, so let's go down by half again. Not 0.75, just 7.5. Starting to clean up. Like, that's probably pretty close. If we went down, maybe let's go down just a hair more. That's starting to sharpen up pretty nicely. We could maybe throw a smoothing pass on it. Maybe a second or third one. That's probably plenty. If we cut down one more, let's just see what happens if we go one more smaller. Might be too much, but that looks all right. So let's call that good. So now what this gives me is a mesh that if I render this, you can see this is a closed mesh. I can throw that to any printer on the planet and it'll print just fine. The other thing about Shrinkwrap is if we needed to get crazy, we could shell this part if we needed to. We could combine these two and then shell that part. We could make these separate pieces. We could, on and on and on and on, depending on how you wanted to do it. But if the goal was some doofus comes into my office at, 3:45 on a Friday and says they need parts to go through the printer before 5, this is how I'm going. I ship it. I come in Sunday at midnight, pull it off the printer, walk into the spray booth, spray it, toss it on his desk. Probably put glitter in his phone for making me work the weekends. All right, so this is good. We're out of here. Okay. So that gives us something that is then actually we can throw through a printer and have a part in our hand. Any questions on that so far? Any questions on anything that we've seen? We're at 10:14 right now. I try to get these done in an hour, so I'm a little over. So I think I'm going to call that good. Certainly happen to ask any questions, answer any questions that you might be interested in. I will probably fuss with this a little bit off camera and add some graphics and some details and stuff like that so that when you see the video posted, the image will look a little fancier than this, but I think generally speaking, I think that's as far as I'm going to take it for this moment. So any questions, happy to answer. If not, I will let you go. Alrighty. My name's Kyle Houchins. This is Getting Started Rhino for Windows. Go make great stuff and happy holidays. Thanks everybody. Bye.